So that's kind of the backdrop. So, anyways, I'm going to pick up stuff. There's a line of local local nationals there, and they're starting to go in, and one of them blows up.
Welcome to How I Embraced the Suck, a podcast where you get to hear from veterans what life in the military is really like. I am your host, Walt, and before we start, you should know that I do not censor the show in any way. You have been warned. Yeah, that's quite the email there you sent. I like that.
Well, it's hard for me to remember a lot of stuff, and what can happen is once a conversation starts going, you're going to follow it to some degree, but it's you're going to know your podcast better than I am, and you know your audience better than I do, and so I just wanted to give you like a whole bunch of information, and then from there, you're going to know better how to guide it. Even though you don't know all the specifics or anything else, you at least have an idea of kind of how you can guide stuff for for the information that you're trying to present to your audience, right?
Yeah, no, I appreciate. I mean, honestly, so yeah, I'll clip this out, but
Your
basically,
choice.
it's well, I mean, I'll clip out me talking. It's basically wherever you want to go. Like it's really just a platform for you to talk about whatever. I don't have a very specific format. I just have a few questions that I try to ask, and then aside from that, I just go
Well,
wherever it goes. So
and that's kind of the deal is like I have a lot of different places I can go and talk, and so your questions are what is going to guide and direct
sure.
how we go. Does that make
Yep.
because
No,
otherwise
that's perfect.
I could talk for a long time, man.
just step out of the way and let her go. Cool. No, yeah, I'm excited. This is gonna be fun. I'm looking forward to it.
We'll give it a try.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't do pre-recorded openings, so getting it started is always the hardest part for me. It's just like so I like to tell people by the time we're done recording, usually that's the time when I and the guest are comfortable enough, and I'm like, hey, we could start recording an episode now. Because it's a cold, you don't know me from Adam, and it's kind of like, hey, just start talking. So it's every episode's a little awkward to get going, and then once it's going, it's like, oh, okay, all right, now we're rolling. But
I don't know how to solve that problem because I mean I still deal with that too. Like not in a podcasting scenario, but like in teaching or doing politician or doing whatever.
sure,
You're constantly attempting to build a relationship with people because a relationship is what is required to actually give a damn what the other person's talking about. And only when you really start to build even just a little bit of that relationship, that's when you actually start to hear the other person as a person. Somebody can have the greatest ideas, but if I don't like you as a person, I'm not interested in what you have to say. And if I dislike you as a person, I'm not going to listen even if you're right. I mean that's just how people are.
I like that. That contributes to my thinking on social media.
Students do not learn from teachers they hate. And you know that from your life. I'm sure you had at least one teacher that you didn't like or that didn't like you.
Sure.
And made class difficult, right? Didn't matter if they were excellent teachers to everyone else in the class. Because of their relationship with you, you didn't learn in that class. Even if you wanted to, you would just be like, I just no, no, and then you extrapolate it beyond students and teachers, and that's all people all the time everywhere. That's just how we are.
Mm-hmm.
It's that differentiation between mankind and humanity to the individual, and that's when you can actually start to have those interactions where you get value.
Yeah. Huh. So my I think social media a lot of times exacerbates conflict, and I think to your point that can be part of it, because if social media makes it easier to get upset at somebody when having a conversation, and once you're upset at them, like you say, I don't really care what you have to say.
Well, and especially because you're not even really upset at them, you're upset at your notion of what you think they are. So you're not even upset at
Mm,
the person. You're,
sure.
you're upset at some, phantasm nightmare that you created, you know, and
Yep.
it just is what it is.
I can't. Yeah, there's been a lot of times where I read something and I mentally reply, and then I reread what somebody wrote, and I'm like, no, they meant something else, and I just assumed the worst.
It's why I liberally block on Twitter, like all the time. It's like,
Oh
oh,
yeah,
you said the slightest thing that I disagree with, block. And it's not because I necessarily think they're wrong or anything, but there's no relationship there. I don't care. Like, do you think that I'm going to
sure,
be able to convince anybody of anything on Twitter? No, it's retarded. I can barely convince my own children to do things. Why would I be so egotistically maniacal as to assume that I'm going to be able to actually install virtue into people over twitter.com?
sure.
That's ridiculous. So I'm just like, oh, that's retarded. Block, keep going. Don't even worry about it.
Yeah, yeah. That's a good. That's a good point. I like that.
Like I will go and look for people who have outrageously hilarious or funny things to say or whatever, and I'll click on it just to go through the replies and see the people who say dumb stuff so I can block them so that I never interact with them at all and they've never messed with me at all. But
Right.
just purely on how they interacted with that other person, I don't want that energy anywhere near me. Block, 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 block. All right, I blocked like 8 people. We'll move on. I'm not
Yep.
spending any more energy on this.
That's a great idea. Well, there's a little advice for the listener.
If they so
But
choose.
if yeah, yeah. Yeah, well, so today we've got Josh with us, who has two hearts, normal one and a purple one.
That's one way to put it, I guess.
Thanks for coming on. Well,
Thank you for having me.
as you were just saying, some people might argue you don't have a normal one with your excessive blocking. You might be
Oh, that's fine.
heartless.
I am very, very heartless to many, many people, but I'm not heartless to the people that I love. I'm not heartless to the people that know me.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's true.
What what people interpret often as heartlessness is really, why aren't you willing to give me stuff for free? Why won't you give me your time
Mm,
for free? You don't deserve any of my time. You've done nothing for me to give you time. Like I'm gonna do my best to love you as Christ would love you, but that doesn't mean you're entitled to anything from me at all. And
sure.
that entitlement, oh, you're heartless. No, I get to choose when I give. You don't get to demand when I give.
Mm,
That's the
hmm
difference. You don't have the power. I do. I choose.
hmm. Yeah, that's an uncommon thought in this day and age, I think.
Most
But
people are
definitely
entitled.
definitely a good one. Yeah, that's true.
Well,
Yeah.
and it makes sense because if you think about it, right, all humans start out as completely selfish monsters. Have you ever dealt with an infant, right?
Right.
They're they're they are completely self-absorbed. They
Yep.
don't know anything about what's going on. They don't care about anything that's going on. They are completely absorbed on their own needs right then, right there in that second. And that's it. And that's all
Hmm.
they have the capacity for. And so all humans start out as absolute monsters. And you have to train them in how to be decent, civilized, sociable individuals. That doesn't just happen. Like I have people who are like, oh wow, your kids are so behaved. You got, you got so lucky. It's like, no, I didn't. I didn't get lucky. Do you know how much time and energy and effort I have spent investing into these kids so
Right.
that they can actually be decent human beings? Like the reason you like my kids being around is because I spent a lot of time raising them. Most people aren't willing to do that investment. Most people don't actually love their kids. They say they do, but love is an investment. It's a sacrifice. And if you're
Hmm.
not sacrificing for your kids, then what you're doing tells me more than what you say.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and it's kind of like the saying, are you raising children or are you raising adults?
Yeah,
Is
yeah,
your goal to raise a kid, a child, create a child, or to train them into an adult? Hmm.
yeah. And most
Yeah.
people, of those of whom little is asked, little will be given. Right. So if you never have any expectations of children, why and society does not have expectations of children. Remember high school? Like how many were just people were just walking around completely still self-centered, not focused, not disciplined, not working, not doing anything of value to themselves or the community or the world at large, like nothing, right?
Hmm.
And it's like, well, if you have spent 18 years telling people that they are allowed to be completely self-absorbed, you just think that they're going to actually become responsible citizens when they turn 18 years old. Like, the clock strikes 12, you turn 18, and all of a sudden, yippee-ki-yay, now you're an adult, and the no, it's not how it works.
Yeah.
You know, small. You start with giving small responsibilities, and you build from that.
Hmm.
You know? We don't do that as a culture or as a society.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's true. So, what's kind of an overview of your military service, time in the army?
um, well, I think I have to preface by saying I'm at least third or fourth generation military. So I was a legacy veteran, right? That was just a part of my home life growing up. Was although my dad wasn't in the army when I was in, and neither was my grandfather. That service was still a part of our family, and so military service was always honorable. That was a part of what we did. And then the next thing you have to know is that 9/11 happened my senior year. That's kind of a big deal. And so
Yeah.
those two things combined meant that I joined the Army as soon as I graduated high school. I joined initially, I went military intelligence, but I didn't make it through Defense Language Institute foreign language school. It was difficult. And just as I was saying earlier about other kids, I didn't have the discipline for it. I was smart enough that I didn't need to study when I was in school. So when I finally was in a difficult situation with having to learn a foreign language, I didn't know how to study. I didn't have the skill set. And so I ended up failing out. Not because I didn't have the ability, but because I didn't know how to work. Right. So like all the things that I was saying earlier about discipline and everything else apply just as much to me. And I still had far more discipline than most people my age did.
Hmm.
So I didn't make it through DLI. So I went and needs the Army, which meant I lost my $20,000 enlistment bonus. That's what that laziness cost me, was $20,000 in 2002, which was a lot of money for an 18-year-old kid.
So
Uh,
did you lose it, or you like, as in you had to pay it back, or you would
I
have
never
got
got
it
it.
once you finished it? Okay, I
Yeah,
got you.
I would have got it once I finished, but I didn't finish, and so I didn't get it.
Sure.
Um, and then I went on and went to Signal Corps, and I was doing line of sight communications in the Signal Corps. Got my first duty station was Korea, and when I was in Korea, I didn't like Signal Corps, and the military always needs mechanics. Like they need people in the motor pool desperately because the vehicles are always going. And so instead of working, swinging hammers and doing whatever for Signal Corps, I just went to the motor pool and I started turning wrenches in the motor pool, and I liked it. And so they were closing out my MOS that they had just said was needs of the Army. Now they were closing it out. And so they said I could reenlist early to change MOSs, and so I became a diesel mechanic. So in oh four, I became a diesel mechanic, I believe. Oh three, oh four, something like that.
Hmm.
Uh Diesel mechanic, and then I was stationed at uh Fort Hood. No, I was stationed at Fort Bragg in the 27th Engineer Battalion, and I was turning wrenches there. We got deployed out to Afghanistan, and so that was fun. Afghanistan oh 04, oh 05. Um, and then after that, I went to Fort Hood. Afghanistan's where I got my Purple Heart.
Okay.
Although I didn't get it for years later, uh, and we'll talk about that if you want.
Hmm.
But
Yeah, yeah.
and then after Afghanistan, I went back to Fort Bragg, and then I got orders, and I re-enlisted to leave Fort Bragg, and I went to Fort Hood, and then I was at Fort Hood, and we went to Iraq, did 15 months in Iraq, 08, 09. And then '09, I came back and I met my wife and we got married and I got out of the army shortly thereafter. So I did like 7 years and 10 months or something.
Okay. Sure. Okay, two contracts or whatever, probably. Less.
Yeah,
Yeah.
two.
Yeah.
Yeah, two tours. Two
Okay.
tours of duty in combat and then two enlistments also, yes. Hmm.
Oh, okay. Sure. Sure. Now, okay.
But it
Yeah, I guess it
depends because like you can have different lengths of contract for your service. Like
that yeah, that's what I was wondering, cuz some are
yeah,
like 6 years and I don't know all the reasons, but
it
y-
you get to determine it to some extent. But like my initial contract was for military intelligence, and it was a 6-year contract. But that's because the training for it was a year and a half of training.
gotcha.
So they don't want to give you a 2-year contract when a year and a half of it is training, and then they only get to use you for 6 months. If
Right.
we're going to pour, $1 million into you for training, we want to get at least 5 years out of your sorry butt, right? But depending on what your job is, like if you were, I mean, they needed people so bad when I joined that they were doing like 2-year contracts just to get people in.
Okay, sure. Depending on the MOS.
Yep.
Yeah.
Depending on the MOS, depending on the training, and so on. Yep.
Hmm. And then once they got them, boy, we got you. You can re-enlist and yeah.
Well, I mean, re-enlistment contracts are generally better than initial enlistment contracts because they don't have to train you as much. So,
Oh, sure.
and it's
And you're
cheaper.
go ahead.
It's cheaper for the army or the military too because now they know that you at least got through basic training. You've got a basic level of soldiering skills, and so we're starting to develop a jacket, a personnel jacket of what your capabilities are, and
Mhm.
so now we can kind of move you around, but you're not just going to like fall out and Like we can't use you and we just waste all the money. Worst case, we'll just, we can look at your jacket and go, okay, well, you can be a cook or you can do whatever, but at least you're still in. You're still doing something. You're being useful in some way.
Right, right. Huh.
Because even a 10%, and it's probably at least 10%. Excuse me, at least 10% failure rate in basic training just due to injuries and
Mm,
people going AWOL because they can't stand being away from mom. It's the first time they've ever done it, or drug use, whatever stupid stuff it is. The
sure.
first time that people have been had to deal with discipline, if you've got a 10% failure rate in basic training, you're already at a point where you're like, it's cheaper to keep them than it is to find new ones.
Right. Yeah, no kidding. So yeah, I I had never really thought about it. How many what percentage of diesel engines are there in the army as opposed to gasoline?
Oh, there's almost no gasoline engines.
Okay,
The
yeah,
only
I
gas
hadn't even thought about it.
the only gasoline engines that there are in the military, in the army, it may be
Mhm.
different in other places, but in the army, um, there were Jimmies, which were from like between the Korean War and Desert Storm time frame.
Okay.
Yeah, old GMC Jimmies, which were never used in deployment or anything. That would just be like a shop vehicle.
Sure.
And I think that's pretty much it. But we built our military around diesel,
Okay. Huh.
so it's
I
it's
never thought about
designed
that.
that way for oh yeah, logistics is a big deal. Wars are
Oh, sure.
won on beans, bullets, and fuel and ammo, right? So
Yep.
like if you've got everything operating off of the same thing, which we call diesel, but in the military it's called JPA, other than aviation uses aviation fuel. Well, then you've just simplified your logistics chain a whole bunch.
Sure. Sure.
So,
Huh.
when we were overseas, in deployments and whatnot, you would have some gasoline engines, but those would be like Toyota Hiluxes or vehicles from the local economy that were take pulled in just to do light duty stuff. But
Sure.
all military vehicles, almost all of them, were diesel.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes sense.
And almost all of the Navy's equipment is either diesel or nuclear.
Oh, sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then
So,
that again, yeah, commonality.
yep,
Hmm.
exactly. Right. You want to, so you're not going to have the best for everything, but it's like you good enough is good enough a lot of the time. You don't need excellence. You don't need uh, tip of the spear everything all the time. You good enough, especially in military applications, is good enough. And our good enough is already far better than most other people's. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's like I mean there's maybe they are going to now, but people always talk about replacing the M16 and there's been all these programs and everything and what they produce might be a little better, but it's not better enough cuz there's so many units out there uh, and especially if they're talking about changing the caliber and connection with it. It's just that's the investment in stockpiles is way too much. You got to be magic in order to overcome that.
I'll give you an example of how this can ripple down the ages, right?
Okay.
I believe train tracks are 4 feet 6 inches wide. Okay. Why are you saw this thread?
No, no, but I think I know where you're going with it.
Right. Why are train tracks 4 feet 6 inches wide? Well, the reason why is because you need to be able to move goods and merchandise from trains onto trailers and vice versa. And when trains were first coming around, we didn't have engines, we had horse drawn carriages. And horse drawn carriages are built where their wheels are 4 feet 6 inches or 8 inches apart. Why
Okay.
are carriages 4 feet 6 inches apart? Because that's what the ruts are. Where did the ruts come? Well, that's how the ruts were built in Europe, which then got transferred over here because the same people who made them in Europe ended up making them here.
Right.
Well, why were the ruts 4 feet 6 inches in Europe? Because that was the width of two horses' asses, and your average Roman chariot was just wider than two horses. And so a thing that happened over 2,000 years ago still affects diesel engines today.
Right. Wow.
Yeah, it's why in older cities you see lots of one-way streets. It used to be that streets were
Mm,
made 5 to 6 feet wide because your carriage wheels were 4 feet 6 inches apart, and you'd have a little bit more room on the sides. And so you only needed 5 to 6 feet for a lane. Well, now we need 8 feet per lane. You're
right.
not getting that. You're not tearing down all the buildings to build a new road. So they just made it a one-way street because they can't get 8 foot on each side.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and kind of to the opposite. Years ago, I was in a small town, Chalice, Idaho, and now it's very small. But years and years ago, 100 years ago plus, it was one of the larger towns in the area,
Mhm.
and the mule trains would come over the hills, and they'd come down the main street, and they'd turn around. They take this whole mule train and turn it around in this main street, right down the
Mhm.
middle of town. And so, because apparently turning around a mule train takes a certain amount of width, that's how wide the street was. And so now, to this day, Main Street's like 6 lanes wide.
Mhm.
You can park 2 cars deep on each side and still have a parade go down the middle. And
Yeah.
it was like, that's kind of cool. And kind of the opposite. It's not big enough to justify building another block in the middle, but it's huge. I think one of the
Yeah.
locals was like, "Yeah, I have the record for speed up this hill in reverse in my pickup, the town record." I'm like, "Oh, okay." Like, yeah, I went to jail for it,
Eh.
but huh?
But anyway, yeah, you can't once a machine hits a certain amount of size, the inertia becomes so high that the cost to change it just becomes prohibitive.
Yeah, yep,
Yeah. And the other thing with, looking at all these future weapon systems and everything else, which directly relates to, diesel maintenance, is every time that you add complexity to the machine, you're adding more potential breakpoints, right? So it might be that you could find a round that's better or whatever, but are the costs associated with it good enough to overcome all, the weight of inertia that already exists and the new problems that you're going to create? Like and diesel engines are funny because they don't require electricity to operate; it just operates off of pressure, right? Well, how many diesel engines do you know that don't have any electricity on them? And the answer is none, right? Because
right,
we've got glow plugs, we've got radios, we got all kinds of electronics all over this stuff. I've been teaching, electricity to my kids for like a week and a half now. And it's like, well, why are you teaching electricity? Because literally all of modern life is built on electricity, and that includes engines. And but the flip side is that the more and more complex we make these systems, the more specialized you have to be able to repair them, and the more fragility you introduce into the system.
mm,
Like because you're like if you've got a rod of iron, how hard is that to break? It's pretty
right,
difficult, right? But as soon as you forge it into individual links and you've got all those linked up, well, no one link of that chain is stronger than the weakest link of the chain, right? And so every time, but a chain has more versatility and more utility
yep,
than a simple rod of iron does. A rod of iron can do one thing and one thing only, and that's be a lever. That's about it.
sure,
Whereas if you've got a chain, you can no longer use it as a lever, but you can use it in a whole bunch of other different things, including shortening it and lengthening it and using hooks, and you can do all kinds of stuff.
Hmm.
But but that's like engineering in a nutshell. I think it was Albert Einstein who said that the beauty of engineering isn't when you can add anything else; it's when there's nothing else you can take away. And we, as a
Hmm.
humanity, have forgotten this concept, and we're going so far down specialization that it's going to become impossible to actually maintain the beast that we've created because
Hmm.
people don't know, they don't have a concept of the systems and how all the systems interact together. And if you don't know the systems and you don't know how they interact, how the hell can you repair it?
Yeah. Huh.
um, it's like the Romans again. First they stopped building new aqueducts, then they stopped repairing aqueducts, and then they forgot about aqueducts.
Yeah.
Right? Like you have to have that constant ability to be able to do that stuff. And if you don't, and it becomes so complex and so difficult, it just gets forgotten
You
if
can't
people aren't
repair
willing to
what
do hard work.
you can't repair what you can't build.
Correct.
Hmm. I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah. Well, because you can't understand it.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
And in order to repair a thing, you actually need to be able to understand it. And in order
Hmm.
to fully be able to understand it, that means you have to be able to both build it and take it apart. Now, you don't need to know all of the individual stuff and everything else, but at least on a macro level, you need to be able to know how the jigsaw pieces work together. And then,
Mm-hmm.
using logic and reason, you can kind of figure out how those pieces work and what they do, and you can start to create mental models of what needs to be done. But if you don't have an understanding of what the the unitary purpose is, then there's no way that you can then look at the individual pieces and figure out what they are and how they connect and how these different systems create a system.
Hmm.
It's literally impossible.
Yeah. Spoken like a true professor,
I'm not a professor.
a true teacher.
I don't even know if I'm a teacher, at least a good teacher. I'm just trying.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I like that. The thought that you put into it. It's good to be made to think or to be encouraged to think.
It's
Hmm.
helpful. There are many things that you cannot control in this world, but one thing that you can control is you.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can't control what other people do, but you can control how you react to it.
Correct.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's why
Hmm.
gallows humor is a thing, right? When
Mm,
everything is going sideways, you can laugh or you can cry. Neither one's going to solve anything, but laughter is at least more fun. So you might as well laugh.
right. Right. Yeah. Oh, that's true. I like that. It's more fun. Hmm. Yeah. Um. Yeah. You mentioned that you're a Purple Heart, so you were. I'm sure everybody knows Purple Heart is for getting wounded in. Is it in combat or in a theater of war? What's the
Uh,
technical? I think it's
a
in
Purple
combat, isn't it?
Heart is getting wounded due to enemy action,
Okay. Okay.
and I'm pretty sure that it can only happen in a declared enemy status. So like, uh, I don't know, but basically, yeah, you have to be
Sure.
a casualty of war of some
Okay.
war. Right.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. That's what I thought. Yeah. Huh.
Due,
But it took
a casualty
years.
of war due to enemy action.
Right. Yeah. Oh, I stubbed my toe when I was in
Then,
there. Yeah, it doesn't count.
yep, yep. Blue on blue does not count for Purple Heart. It has to be enemy action.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah. Yeah. Or
Yeah.
even blue on green, probably.
Nope, that doesn't count either.
Interesting. Which is, I mean, it makes
Happened a
sense
lot.
for the purpose of the ward. It makes sense, but it's kind of like It feels a little bit like, oh well, that's almost acknowledged, an unacknowledged sacrifice or something. But hmm.
Well, or we could just stop trying to make people our allies who aren't.
Right, right, right. And it would be disadvantageous to them to have a special award for that, because that it wouldn't benefit anybody except
Well, it
maybe
might benefit the soldier, but
it could,
it's not.
right.
No, it's not going to benefit the bureaucracy in any way to bring light to the amount of blue on blue
Mm,
or blue on green action there might be.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, you don't
Hmm.
want to put that out there.
So why you said it took you years to get it? What was? I mean, if you want to talk about the incident itself, and then also just um maybe that
Sure.
has to do with why it took so long. I don't
Yeah,
whatever
yeah.
where
We'll
we
talk
go.
about both, right?
Sure.
So this was, I want to say it was 04, 05. I think it was the beginning of 05. And we're in Afghanistan, been there a few months and everything. And at this point, I'm now working at uh, Bagram Airfield. I am. I did all my tours with comm engineers, and we were doing route clearance. If you don't know what route clearance is, that's where you go out and look for
Mm,
bombs. And if you're
yeah.
going out and looking for bombs, chances are good you're going to find them. And in 04, 05, we didn't yet have MRAPs. We didn't have all the cool stuff that we did later. We were still welding metal armor onto 5 tons and deuce and a halves and putting sandbags into soft skins, right?
Wow.
Yeah. So it was, well, because all the money and all the materials went to Iraq. Afghanistan was the war that everybody forgot,
Right.
which was still better because it didn't have to deal with officers. It was better. Uh, but so anyways, we doing route clearance, we constantly had stuff that was getting blown up. And so they sent me down to, because I was in battalion maintenance. And so they sent me down to Joint Base Balad because I knew how to do paperwork and I knew how to do what I was told. And they were like, we need you to receive items in uh, blown up stuff that got blown up around the country. They would load it onto jingle trucks that jingled, and and they would put them on like flatbed trucks and on lowboy trailers and stuff like that. And they would haul them to Bagram, and that was our depot level. And so that's where
Mm,
we had our boneyard for vehicles and uh, stuff that was blown up. We would try to repair it and get it fixed. And if we couldn't fix, we would steal stuff out of the boneyard. And if we couldn't repair it at all because it was just destroyed, then it went into the boneyard, and we would need to keep track of what all went in there and keep track of parts because
mm,
we're burning through equipment so fast, and we need new equipment coming out, and we need equipment that we have that can be repaired as fast as possible.
mm,
So one of my duties was that I would go outside the gate to where the local national drivers were, and I would pick up equipment that was getting shipped to Joint Base Balad, and then I would take it to all the different places it needed to go, and I would escort the local national drivers because we're not letting them drive around a military base without an escort and so on. I didn't know it, but apparently that specific day, the vice president was coming to JBB
mm.
and Joint Base Balad. And no, this is Afghanistan, so it'd be Bagram Airfield. I'm sorry,
Oh
I get
yeah.
the two
Yep.
mixed
Yep.
up. I get the two mixed up, people. JBB Camp Anaconda was Iraq. I'm sorry, that comes later. Been there too.
Bagram, Balad, same. Start with the same letter.
Yeah, it was Bagram Airfield because we're Afghanistan. That was Afghanistan. And so I'm outside to go and pick up the stuff, and a suicide bomber goes off. Because every day you would bring local nationals in a win hearts and minds
Mm,
scenario.
hmm.
We would take local nationals, and they would go through a vetting process so that they could come and work inside the base
Sure.
with the idea of maybe they're just picking up trash or they're doing menial tasks, but at least they are getting exposure to Americans so they can realize that we're not these horned devils, like we're just
Mm,
people. just like they are,
Sure.
right? And so the basic idea, I think at least, was, we're putting money into the local population, the poor people, so that they don't hate us, and they're getting interaction with Americans, so that they know that we're just people, so that maybe they won't
Hmm.
hate us. um, so that's kind of the backdrop. So, anyways, I'm going to pick up stuff. There's a line of local local nationals there, and they're starting to go in, and one of them blows up. He's wearing, the man dress outfit, right, where he's
Sure.
got baggy pants and then a shirt that comes down to his knees. So, and he basically turned his legs into a claymore. He had
Mm.
C4 strapped to his legs, and then ball bearings and pieces of metal and everything uh, strapped to that. And so, he was,
Hmm.
when he went off, it went off.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think it killed like 27 local nationals. It killed
Wow.
one uh, American soldier, PFC Zumbo. Um, if his girls ever see this, man, I hope well. I hope everything turned out all right. Um, Diana was a an American civilian. She died, and
Hmm.
one Republic of Korea soldier was there as well. One Rock
Hmm.
Army soldier was there. Uh, and so, anyways, he went off, and I got really lucky because I was talking with PFCZ, and he was directly between me and the blast, like directly between me. If I would have been
Oh,
inches to either side, the shrapnel
sure.
would have got me too. So I got lucky, and I didn't get the shrapnel. I just got the concussion, and it knocked
Wow.
me out. And when I woke up, I was literally pulling security over there where people were screaming and whatnot. I didn't know what was going on, and I woke up and I was moving and I didn't even
Wow.
know what I was doing. Yeah.
Wow.
Well, that's the whole reason why they train you the way they train you, right? Is so the whole
Mm.
purpose of the training is to get you to the point where you will respond naturally. You will respond unnaturally in the way that they have trained you to respond. Right? It is not natural that when an explosion happens, you move towards the explosion, you bring out your rifle, and you're laying fire and looking around and seeing that's not natural. The natural thing to do is to run screaming as far away from that as you can because it's bad news bears.
Just like all
Right?
the
But when
movies, everybody
right,
runs from the destruction.
right. But when I woke up, I was actually over there pulling security, trying to make sure that something else wasn't going to happen. Um,
Wow.
but I was knocked out. And then I stayed out there for hours as we waited on QRF, and we loaded up people into, the ones who were living. We were, doing um, emergency medical care to try to, put tourniquets on people and try and keep them alive and do whatever. And
Hmm.
it was a bad day. Um, but the I had headaches and migraines. I had a concussion, and I had headaches and migraines for a while afterwards, like a week.
Sure.
They
Yeah.
were giving me, they went and did a CAT scan and stuff like that, and they're like, oh, we don't know. Well, at that point in time, and this will relate to the time distance, right?
Okay. Sure.
So at that point in time, um, brain damage was not a thing that was associated as an injury, right? When they said an
Oh,
injury, they meant you were bleeding or a bone had been broken or something like that, right?
sure.
So post concussion syndrome, where you got your doggone brain rocked and your brain was swelling in your head, and you know maybe you've got some light hemorrhaging or whatever in your brain or whatever, but it like that
Mm.
wasn't a thing. We don't see anything wrong with you, and
Hmm.
so that didn't there was no Purple Heart for that at that time. And so later, years later, they changed it, and they were like, because so many people were getting blown up, and they're like, oh, this is actually a thing where
Right.
brain damage is actually a problem. Who would have thunk it, right? Uh, so anyway, years
Patton
later, it
Patton
changed.
nervously shifts in his grave.
Uh, so Years later
Sorry.
they changed. No, you're fine. Years later they changed it, and they included post concussion syndrome is what they called it, or
Mm.
traumatic brain injury, TBI. That's what it was.
Oh yeah, yeah, sure.
Right. TBI got included under the list of injuries that you were eligible for Purple Heart for. Because
Mm.
when I got it, it wasn't included.
Right.
That's what I'm saying is when I
Right.
got my
Okay.
TBI, it wasn't under the list of approved injuries. And so they retconned it later. Um, and then I put in for it, and then it was a nightmare to try to get it. I'm sitting there and fighting with attorney generals and or IG inspector generals and whatnot, and I'm trying to get it done, but I'm not at the same unit where I got blown up at. I'm at a different unit, and I'm
More
trying to
paperwork.
I'm trying to get all this stuff done, and I'm E4 hand who doesn't know nothing, and everybody's smarter than me, and they're like, oh, you don't get anything for TBI. I'm like, it's right here. I printed it out. It's right here, and they're like, yeah, we don't know about that, and we weren't there, so like I don't know, we're not doing it. And so I would put in for an
Wow.
IG investigation. I kept trying until finally I got out of the army. And then I talked to my congressman and I submitted him the exact same paperwork that I had submitted the inspector general. And I said, here's the paperwork that says TBIs can get Purple Hearts. Here's the paperwork that says I have a post concussion syndrome and TBI. Here's the date. Here's all of it. Can you make this happen? Because like, and the thing is I don't really care for me per se, but it matters for my kids, right?
Oh,
Like it,
sure.
they get bonuses and they get opportunities.
Oh,
Like
okay.
I couldn't have afforded to go to college. It's part of the reason I joined the army, right? Well, my kids can get scholarships and whatnot. At the time, I would
Mm.
have been like, if a child has a better chance of getting into a United States military academy if their father is a Purple Heart recipient, father or mother.
Oh,
That
okay,
that's
sure.
that's a medal that is a an inroad to be able to get into.
Sure.
Like legacy is one. If your mother or father is X rank in the military, that's another one. And if you have heroism, and Purple Heart falls under
Sure.
heroism, and so you can sit there and get a better route into USMA or one of
Hmm.
the military academies.
Sure. Huh.
Uh, so that was the reasoning why, and it's quite frankly, it's like I earned it. I didn't want to. I
Right.
became a like I went military intelligence and diesel mechanic and signal corps. Like I wasn't trying to be a hero or nothing. Like I'm not. I'll be the first to tell people I'm no hero. I'm just a dude who was trying to do my job.
Yeah.
But I still got blown up. So I'm kind of, I would like the thing that was specifically made for people who got injured. I want that
Right.
thing, please.
Right. Right.
You know, it's not like a thank me for my service thing, but it matters to me, damn it.
Yeah.
And I'm
Yeah.
okay with that.
Yeah. Here, if you
Uh,
do this job for us, we'll give you a paycheck. And then you're like, okay, well, I'd like the paycheck. It a little different, but yeah, I understand.
well, yeah, and like I said, and there are perks that go with it. And I knew there were perks, and I was like, well, I fucking earned it. So yeah, I'll take it. Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but yeah, I submitted the paperwork to the to that representative, and I think he had it all sorted out within like I don't know 8 weeks or something. It's like why couldn't I get this done in 5 years
Wow.
in the army? Like, but
Wow.
why couldn't we keep people? I don't know. I don't know why you have so many problems with retention.
Here's an example.
And even then, I still would have told people to join the military, but I don't anymore.
Mm,
I do not
sure.
recommend that young people join. My kids are, if I can help it, they're not joining. Not the military as it exists today.
Mm. Well,
Maybe if
yeah.
some generals get held accountable over over Afghanistan and other stuff that's happened over the last
Mm,
decade, maybe maybe if some people go to jail for this COVID BS, maybe. But
mm.
do you see that happening? Because I don't. So
Well, I do. Let me frame it because I like to ask the same
I'm trying not
question.
to make it political, but
No, no, no. Hey, wherever you take it is, yeah, I have no boundaries. So,
yeah.
well, I mean, I don't know. I have
Well,
boundaries, but wh-
I try not to make it political in that I want the words that I say to be able to be heard by the greatest number of people. I don't want people to shut it off because they think that my
sure,
mentality is just red or blue. And it's like, no, 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 it goes beyond that, you
you,
know.
you don't want to make them hate you. Then they stop listening to you. To loop back to what you were saying earlier.
Yeah, kinda. Like I don't care if they don't hate me, but like hate me after you've heard all of the stuff, right? Like then at the end, if you decide, no, he's really just, bigot or whatever, and I don't want to, it's like, okay, well, fine.
Sure.
Like, but you at least heard the words I had to say, and so
Hmm.
maybe it'll be beneficial to you in your life.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, no, I'm glad you brought that up because I do like to ask every guest if what would you tell a kid if they came up to you, if 16 or 17, if they came up to you and said, "Hey, I'm thinking about joining the military," or I should say, how would you advise them?
I would advise them not to. Um, and it's hard because like there's no coming of age ritual, and masculinity requires something wherein you go from being a boy to being a man because
Mm.
men are not born, men are made, right? And it
Hmm.
takes it takes an anvil, and it takes heat, and it takes pounding. That's what is required to transform a boy and forge them into a man, right?
Hmm.
But I don't think you're going to get that in the military anymore. Not really. Like you might get a homunculus of it, but the costs associated with it currently, especially as regards to the vaccine mandates and whatnot, I
Mm.
don't think the juice is worth the squeeze in that regard. So I would suggest that look at look at your local sheriff's organization, volunteer fire department. Um, Go and do like a wildland fire rescue. Like, go out there to
Hmm.
like the Rockies to do like serious, legit fire rescue stuff. Go work in the oil field for a few years. Like, if you want to get hard, oil field to do it to you. I worked in the oil field for a few years. Um, because you got to test your metal. Like, that's part of what being a guy
Hmm.
is.
Yeah.
Like, you want to do that, and it's unfortunate that they're pale imitations of what the military should be, but the military is a pale
Mm.
imitation of what it should be. And like I said,
Hmm.
I just don't think the costs are worth it currently because the people who are going to send you to war to die in a foreign land do not care about you and do not care about our nation and do not care about our people,
Hmm.
right? And I am more than willing to die for my people, for my family, and and for the my nation, the values and the ideals that it has. But my government doesn't represent any of those things,
Hmm. Yeah. Sure.
and hasn't for a few years now. And so if you don't have that at the top, then what are you doing it for? And if the answer
Hmm.
is, well, I'm doing it for my family and I'm doing it for my community, I'm doing it for my values and my heritage and the legacy and everything else, it's like, okay, cool. So
Hmm.
where can you do a thing where you're supporting your family and you're honoring your legacy, you're doing all those things that you're talking about in a place that actually honors all of those things? Because the military
Mm.
doesn't,
Sure.
right? You're not actually honoring those things if you're working for people that hate those things.
Hmm.
It can't be, right? Because if you honor heritage and legacy and history and virtue and value and family and God, like if those are the things you honor, then going and working for something that's actively attempting to destroy every one of those things isn't actually honoring them.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a good take on it. A good viewpoint. I don't remember who it was. I think it was an Iranian woman. This might have been some years ago, who said, the leaders of my country have more in common with the leaders of America than they do with me, and I have
Yes,
more in common with the people of America than they do with their leaders. And I was like,
it's
that's a good,
accurate.
that's a good point. and and it's possible with the fog of time that that's always been the case, but it seems, at best, it seems like it's more the case.
We're at least aware of it now, if we weren't
Sure.
before.
Yep. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly.
And I don't think that that's the way it's always been. I do think that we've had uh, good people in place, and I think the military. I don't think the military was. Um, I think the military did care a lot about legacy and heritage and history, and those weren't just buzzwords to bring in, you know, Southern boys to come die for them. Like I think that
Hmm.
was, I think that was a large part of the heritage of the military. But
Hmm.
whenever your career takes precedence over what is right, then at some point that's going like, and it goes even deeper than that, right? Like if there's no universal truth, then none of it matters, right?
Hmm.
Because if there's no universal standard of truth, and instead it's each individual has their own idea of truth, and they're each speaking their truth,
Mm-hmm. Right.
then right, then what you have said is that there's no universal standard of truth, and therefore there's no universal standard of virtues at all. Because
Hmm.
your truth for honor is not the same as my truth for honor. And so therefore I am honoring by making sure that I get the biggest bag possible. Right?
Hmm.
Everything can be subverted if there is no universal standard of truth. And that's the world that we live in today.
Hmm.
Because nobody wants to be subservient to the idea of truth or beauty or honor or goodness. Everybody wants to sit there and argue about what these concepts and ideas are. And it's like, look, either there is a universal standard of that which is true, that which is beautiful, and that which is good. We can agree upon this thing, or each person becomes their own little g god, creating their own reality, and
Hmm.
there's no framework upon which we can work together to build society. Like because every person
Hmm.
just becomes an atomized individual. And at that point, what difference does it make whether I clap you, I clap your shoulder and we work together, or whether I shoot you? There's no difference because my reality is only what is best for me. And that's all that matters.
Hmm. Yeah. Yep. Hmm. Similar to, I'm trying to connect this in my mind. Similar to how love involves sacrifice, which is a cost.
Yes,
Um, the other virtues you were mentioning also involve a cost, and
correct.
to acknowledge the truth of that assumes, um, acknowledges the cost and the need to spend that cost if you want to do it. If that makes sense.
It does.
I'm
Yeah.
trying to
I
think it out
mean,
in my mind a little bit. But I usually talk before I fully form the idea, so
oh, no,
there
yeah,
we go.
that's how communication works, right? Um, well, and it's funny because like the Greeks had like what, seven different words for love. Um,
Okay.
and part of the reason for that is because when they were developing those concepts, it was before Christ. So they didn't yet have the concept of love being sacrificial. Like they didn't have that unitary
Mm.
idea. So they had like eros, which is brotherhood love. It's like, that's where the concept of like, blood is thicker than water.
Mm.
The blood spilled on the battlefield is thicker than the water of the womb. That's what that actually means.
Oh. Oh,
Yes.
interesting. Huh, okay.
Yes. So the people with whom I have shared hardship and sacrifice with, I have a stronger bond with them than I do with my birth brother over here,
Mm.
whom we don't share those experiences. And then
Hmm.
you had familial love, and you had paternal love, and you had all of these different loves based on external things, but
Hmm.
without recognizing that the common bond between all of them was sacrifice. And so love is sacrifice, just expressed in different ways. And that's why they had
Hmm.
different words for love, because they didn't have that unifying theme. They didn't have that universality of love. They could only see it in small
Hmm.
pieces. Or at
Yeah.
least that's my opinion. I'm just a decent mechanic.
Yeah, no, it's I like the thought provoking, or the provoking of thought that does. Huh.
We're going
Yeah.
far afield from anything that was on the email I sent. See, I told you this would happen.
I was thinking the same thing. But yeah, I that's what I like about the show, honestly, is it's just a time to chat. And then yeah, I think, and this is kind of with social media, and I know I sound real boomer, ranting on this, but with social media, I think to a certain extent people have lost personal interaction.
Yes.
And so I just enjoy the opportunity to just chat and learn, and like you're saying, we're ostensibly here to talk about, the army and Purple Heart and IEDs and stuff, and then we're talking about the
But
philosophy of love, and it's pretty
but but
interesting.
but can you truly understand why people would willingly volunteer to sacrifice themselves for these virtues and ideals if you don't understand love? Like that's the problem
Mm,
that we're currently having, is because they don't understand love and they don't value love, and that's why they don't value the virtues, the ethics, history, heritage, tradition. All of those things spring from love. And
hmm,
so if they don't understand it, and it's obvious they don't based upon the ads they've been putting out for recruiting, it's like you're not gonna pull people in to sacrifice based on selling them
mm,
on things that they're not willing to sacrifice for. Right? Like I'm again, almost everybody I know is willing to sacrifice for their children, or at least they'll say that. Right? At the very least they'll say that.
sure.
Excuse me. But not a lot of people are willing to sacrifice for some suit halfway across the country who's making their life hell.
Hmm,
And so, you have to get people to buy into a commonality. And that's exactly what we've been getting away from for the last decade at least, is a shared understanding of what it means to be American. You
hmm.
know, we've just been atomizing, and it hasn't. I don't think that's been a byproduct of the people. That's been a byproduct of the leadership.
Hmm. Hmm.
You can achieve more power through an atomized population because they are not unified in thwarting what you want to accomplish.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. The old, um,
Divide and
t-
conquer.
yeah, Benjamin Franklin. Together we shall stand, or no, we must all hang together. Most assuredly, we shall all hang separately. The
Correct.
same concept. Yeah. Hmm.
Basically,
It's easier
just
it's easier to control a fractured uh group that's trying to oppose you. It's easier to
right.
fracture them and then deal with them individually or in smaller groups.
Well, I mean
Hmm.
that's the whole reason behind universal suffrage in the United States.
Mm.
There's a reason why in the beginning only landowners could vote. And now,
Okay.
sure, we can say
Sure.
that originally it was male white landowners,
Sure.
but
Sure.
if we actually go with the Constitution and like we recognize it was flawed, and we're like, okay, so we're getting rid of male, although I'm still iffy on the 19th, but that's fine. Like
Sure.
we'll
Yeah.
still we'll just ignore it and we'll say we'll get rid of male and we'll get rid of white,
Sure.
and we only have landowners who can vote, only
Mm.
homesteads, only property owners. Then you've already revolutionized America because you've returned it back to the place it came from. Because in the
Hmm.
beginning, the way it was designed was for property owners to be the ones who voted, because what you had basically was you had sovereign people who owned land, who lent a piece of their sovereignty to their elected representative, and only to their elected representative, because the Senate was actually elected by the states. The senator
Hmm.
was a representative for the states themselves.
Right. Right.
Uh, right. And so you have that dualistic uh, power struggle between the two, where the states are looking out for the interests of the community at large. That's their purpose, and through the senators, and then you have the individuals who are looking out for their individual interests through the House, through the representatives. But the only ones who could do that weren't the ones who were completely self-centered and only focused on today. They had to at least be
Hmm.
meritorious enough to be able to figure out a way to own land. And in so doing, what you've effectively done is you've created an IQ test. Because if you're incredibly low IQ, you're not going to be able to own land. You're not going
Mm.
to be able to figure out a way to make it
Sure.
happen.
Sure.
You've introduced a work ethic test. Because if you're lazy, guess what? You're not going to be able to figure out a way to earn enough money to own land.
And yeah. Yeah. Maybe. For one generation through a will or something. But yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
And like most people don't realize it, but most millionaires, the fortune they pass on is gone by the third generation.
Oh, right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So like you don't have to worry about the dregs of society. You have a constant ability to create a new
Sure.
class wherein the sovereign citizens, the ones who are giving their sovereignty to the nation or to their elected representatives, are the ones who are meritocratically there because of their ability to be able to buy land. But as soon
Mm.
as you diffuse that, then now you no longer have now you don't have the people who are most able, most capable, most willing to sacrifice the present to achieve a better tomorrow. Like you don't have those guys as
Hmm.
much anymore. Now you have a system where everybody is equal, which means that everything drops to the lowest common denominator, right? That's what you've just done. Because you've
Oh,
just
sure. I
gone from
see.
saying that it effectively you've said, producers, right? People who produce enough good or enough goods, but let's just call it good.
Hmm.
Like people who produce enough value in the community to be able to to generate enough wealth to be able to buy land and hold it. Those are the ones that we want to be to have sovereignty and to give that a piece of that sovereignty to the representative and to vote for presidents and states and state offices and everything else, because they're the ones who can see the furthest and are willing to sacrifice today for tomorrow, right? They have a
Mm.
legacy for their children and grandchildren,
Hmm.
right? Your wine mom, 29-year-old, 35-year-old, whatever, who's renting an apartment, there's no legacy there. They don't care.
Hmm.
They're still children. There's
Hmm.
there's there's nothing there that they're interested in, and they're not interested in sacrificing today for a better tomorrow. It's only what have you done for me recently? And I'm not even saying that in a disparaging way. I'm just saying it is what it is.
Sure.
Are,
Yeah.
are you are
Yeah.
you gonna are you gonna have exceptions? Of course you are. But we're talking about broad categories here. And so
Hmm.
in terms of broad categories, those who are able And the good thing about it being just based on property ownership is it's a fairly low bar, right? Like you look at because we love winners, we love underdogs who actually become winners, and so it's
Hmm.
like our American history is replete with examples of Tom Sawyer's and Huck Finn's and all kinds of stuff where strappy people figure out a way to become successful, and then they become successful and
Hmm.
we cheer them on,
Right.
right? And so it's like, I don't care that you were raised poor. I care about what you do. And now, granted, I personally care. I don't want you to grow up in poverty. That stuff sucks. But I'm more interested in the future that you're creating. And in the act of creating a better future for yourself, you become a person who can help me to create a better future for all of society. And I think
Hmm.
I honestly think it's criminal that we take people who do not have an understanding of the future and we force them to be responsible for everything that happens in society, right? Because the thing about the government setup that we have right now, all of the authority is at the top in the elected representatives and whatnot,
Hmm.
but who has responsibility,
Mm. Sure.
right? There's a reason we haven't declared war since World War II because they don't want responsibility, right?
Right. Right.
But let's go with the 2008 housing crash. Who was responsible for that?
Banks.
Who who was
I'm
the one?
guessing. I'm,
Who was the one who ended up having to be responsible for it?
I okay, yeah, sure. Sure. I mean, it hit
Your
the
average
people, hit
tax-paying
individuals.
citizen.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So we end
Hmm.
up bearing the responsibility, although we don't have any of the authority.
Mm. Sure. Sure.
And
That
then what we get told is, well, that's what you voted for, and it's like you've made it so everybody can vote. Like you've degraded what this means to such an extent, and then after you've chained me to a half retard, now I'm the one who has to sit there and pay the cost of you chaining me to him. Like, and it's not just
sure.
one, like it's 11.
Sure.
Because the number of actual net taxpayers as opposed to the number of people who are feeding off the trough is insane, right? Like
Mm.
it's going to cause even more problems in the future. I mean, let's be real. Do you think Social Security is going to be there for you in the
Oh,
future?
yeah. If someone thinks that, under the age of 50, let's say 40 to be safe, dream on.
I would say 50 to be safe, but
Sure.
sure, 40 to be safe. Sure, whatever.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
The principle still remains, right?
Hmm.
Like there's nobody coming to save us. We're
Yeah.
just going to get left holding the bag. And that's what has been happening because we're not able to have actual rational conversations.
Hmm.
Instead, it's emotional appeals to authority. It's, oh, daddy, please come save me. The people who scream, oh, daddy, please come save me, are not serious people who have actually solved problems in their own lives.
Hmm.
It's just not. It's much like, would you think that it is legitimate for me to punish my 2-year-old, my 8-year-old, and my 14-year-old the exact same way and to hold them to the same standards?
Right. Right.
Right.
No.
But,
To
but,
answer your question,
but,
no. But right means
right.
I see where you're going.
But for some reason, we hold this standard for people because they turn 18, and there's no standard according to their abilities, whether they be mental or
Mm.
whether they be spiritual,
Hmm.
right? And spiritual just meaning broadly like you can be smart, but if you're lazy and not willing to do anything and you just want to, shoot up heroin between your toes, like why is it that you get to vote? That's retarded. But we don't believe in a meritocracy anymore.
Right. To that question, to that point, it's interesting. People like to talk about the average voter, um, and with the implication that the average voter is just, you need to kind of cater to them because they're not fully there. Kind of, that's the implication. but then you realize that 50%
Are
of
they
the people
wrong?
voting, well, sure, but then you realize that 50% of the people voting are
Dumber than the
less.
average.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It's like, average is like halfway.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, that
But
was
you're
a
think
that was a comedian. He died recently. I forget his name, but that was his joke that he said all the time.
Oh, okay.
Uh,
Okay.
what was he did the 7 words you can't say. Um, I can't remember his name,
Carlin?
but
Not
yeah,
Carlin.
George Carlin.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that was
Okay.
George. That was George Carlin's joke. He's like,
Okay.
average intelligence, average.
Right.
That's average.
Right.
That means 50% of the people are dumber than that. Dear God. Yeah, and he's right.
Yeah. Huh. The to your point about the authority and stuff, I've said in the past, authority without responsibility is tyranny, and responsibility without authority is slavery.
Yes, correct.
Hmm.
Responsibility without authority is slavery.
Yeah.
And they wonder why men aren't getting married anymore.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Who has all the responsibility in a marriage?
Right. Yeah. The man. Yeah.
Yes, correct. And who has
Yeah.
all the authority to break that contract whenever they want and still hold the other person responsible?
Oh, it currently, yeah. Yeah. No, that's true. The
Hmm.
woman. Yeah.
Yeah.
True. Hmm.
Right. I'm not even casting stones. It's just like you guys created this situation. Well, this is what's going to happen.
Hmm.
I'm lucky. I've been married for 13 years. I got 4 kids. It's great. Like life is great. But
Yeah.
so, so I met my wife.
Yeah.
I came back from Iraq, and I had been talking to a girl online for months while I was overseas in Iraq. Trying to set the stage, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
came back. I came back, and a group of us went to the kettle, and the girl that I've been talking to turned from me and started talking to the guy on her right. And so I just turned to my left and I started talking to this beautiful lady that was right here.
Right.
And yeah, and then we got married like 3 months later.
Oh,
That's how I
that's
met her.
awesome.
I met her because the girl I had been talking to wanted to play fuck games.
Right.
Like,
Right.
I don't care. I don't care. I'll talk to
Right.
this
You put in all
because
that time. You're like, okay, well,
I mean, I knew what she was trying to do. It's like, oh, I'm going to make him jealous and blah.
sure.
I'm not going to play this game.
Yeah.
I'm just not. I'm not interested because I'm not actually invested in any way. I don't care. Like
Hmm.
I hated the games that people played, and it was like I'm not going to do that. I'm going to
Hmm.
be upfront. I'm going to be honest. I'll be brutally honest. It's like I'm not doing any of that stuff. And if you like it and you want to hang, cool. And if you don't and you want to play games, you can go. I'm not. I'm not playing this. And it worked. And
So
I'm still that way to a large extent.
yeah.
I'm just a bit more tactful the
Yes.
older I've gotten.
Yeah. Age does tend. Well, not always. Age does often bring tact, but I have seen instances where, uh, maybe it's a curve. You, as you get older, you gain more tact, and then at a certain point, you're just like, I don't care. I'm going to lose
Well,
all my tact.
I think yeah, you have a greater understanding of tact, and so when you decide that you no longer care about tact, which generally happens because somebody else is being an ass to you, then you know how to go full tactless with
Right.
no fuck. Like you're not even pretending. Like it's not an accident that you were tactless. No, no, no. I am going
Mm,
to intentionally make this as painful as I can for you
right.
because you just made my life difficult. I'm going to bring the hurt locker, right? So it's a
Right.
different level because it's not unintentional. No, no, this is intentional.
Hmm. Yeah. Um. Yeah. So So I'm just going to double check the timeline, and then I have kind of two questions. You
Yeah,
you met your wife, and then you got out, and then you got married, correct?
correct. My wife was a soldier too.
Oh, okay,
I
okay,
met I met
gotcha.
her I met her at Fort Hood. She was a soldier too,
Oh, okay. So
and and then yeah, and then she got out, and then I got out.
okay, huh? So well, okay, yeah, because I was going to ask mostly, um, what was it like transitioning out of the military, and
Oh,
also how did your marriage and your relationship, I'm sure it had something to do with that, especially if she was in the military too, you know.
well, yeah, and it wasn't easy. So the first part about saying I transitioned out of the military would be say I really didn't, because my first 2 years that I was out of the army, I was doing overseas contracting in Afghanistan. So I was gone 6 months, home for 2 weeks, and then gone for another
Mm,
6 months.
okay.
So I wasn't really home. I was just stacking up cash so that we could try to, uh, fast forward a few years of just, running in circles trying to figure out how to make things work.
Sure.
But but after 2 years, she we were on the phone and she was like, "I'm real tired of being a single mom. This isn't what I signed up for. So if you could, you need to come home." And I
Right.
don't. I had always told her because I was making stupid money. It was good.
Hmm. Yeah.
Uh, well, because not a lot of people had my specific skill set of repairing MRAPs, so I
Oh,
made pretty good
sure.
money. Um, uh, and I'd always told her, I was like, look, if it gets to the point where you can't do this, money is not worth my marriage. I will come home. I don't care.
Yep.
And
Sure.
after about 2 years, she was like, I need you home. We're done. And I'm like, I got like 2 months left on this hitch, or you need me home now? She's like, I need you home now. I was like, done. I quit. I made it happen.
Wow.
I ended up working, and while I was over there and waiting on paperwork and whatnot, I got a job uh, at Caterpillar, becoming a diesel tech at Caterpillar.
Mm, okay.
While I was still overseas in Afghanistan, I got the job. So there wasn't even an interview. The interview was like over a phone
Sure. Yeah.
because we didn't have like Skype and all the stuff and everything like we do now. Like that stuff was just in 2010, 2012. Like that stuff wasn't really a thing, and it
Right.
sure wasn't a thing over in the Middle East.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, uh, so I made that happen. Came home. I worked it there for a little while, and then I worked in the oil field for a little while, and then I drove trucks for a while, just trying to make sure that I could take care of the family and put food on the table.
Hmm.
Which meant that all of those jobs still meant that I was gone a lot. I was just home more than when I'd been overseas.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, especially
but it was
oil fields
still,
and driving truck.
yeah,
That's
it
a
was
lot of
still, I
time.
was still gone a lot. And then we finally, three or 4 years ago, the whole time this has been happening, I have been trying to get my paperwork done for the VA because when I got out of the army, I got out at 40%, based on my back and knees,
Right. Right.
40%
So
disability.
and that was before you got the Purple Heart, or before you were
Yeah,
given the Purple Heart. Okay. Yeah.
yes, it was. Which does not add to your disability rating.
Oh, okay. Okay. Good, because I was assuming it did.
No, it does not.
Okay.
I thought it did too. I was wrong. It does not. But I'd been, uh, I've been making really good money and whatnot, and then finally, after about 4 or 5 years of being out, I finally started putting in the paperwork because I kept having more and more issues. I started
Mm,
putting in the paperwork for trying to make sure that I took, got all the stuff that I was supposed to do and whatnot, and starting to go in for counseling for PTSD because I was still having some difficulties with that. You
sure.
know, um, you you spend enough time uh, dancing with the devil, and you become a dead man walking,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah. Sure.
Like, you're already dead. You just haven't died yet. You don't know when it's going to happen, but you're already dead. So,
Hmm.
meh, so it quickly goes from a point where like oh no, there's rockets incoming, run, to like you pick up your food tray and you're eating it as you slowly walk to the bunker because you have to like follow the rules, but you're not really following the rules. You don't really care. It's like
Hmm.
I have no control over whether or not a bomb's going to follow me or not. So like whatever, I just don't care. If I die, I die. If I live, I live. Like you're interrupting my food. Like let me enjoy my freaking food. Uh, but anyway, sorry. Uh,
Yeah.
tangential. Um, So over time, it took me years, but I finally got up to 100% permanent and total disability from the military.
Mm.
And so at that point, I didn't have to work like I had been working just to make sure that I was putting food on the table. I went back to school. I got my associates, and then I got my bachelor's. And then just this year, we I got my bachelor's in business administration in the spring, so like May or whatever, May of 22. And then we sold our house in Texas and moved it up to Indiana so we could be closer to a whole bunch of family. Because
Mm. Sure.
I see problems coming down the pipe, and having a network of people around you is going to be important, in my opinion.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. And I agree. Or the even if somebody doesn't, look ahead and see problems coming, there's still benefits to be gained from having, boomer alert, personal interactions with people. And while there can be a lot of value online, you
People have this crazy idea like we've somehow magically evolved past the primitive tribal creatures that we've been for the hundreds of thousands. Like, no, no.
right.
Like we still have people being born with wisdom teeth. Like we're not that stupid evolved or anything. Like our tribal instincts still exist, and if you don't believe that, you can just go wear a red hat in a blue city and see how far that'll get you. Like
Yeah, sure.
we're you know maybe your tribe is the tribe that you choose to associate may be bigger, but go wear a Dallas Cowboys hat in a greenskin, Green Bay Packers stadium. Like,
Right.
see how that does for you.
Right.
Like we're still tribal. We've just changed it up a little bit, and we're still clannish, right?
Yeah.
And so it's important that you have your clan. And we created lots of like parasocial, almost like playing around the edges, relationships and clan and tribal connections,
Mm.
but that that's not actually a replacement, right? Like you still need those people and you need those
Mm.
interactions because the only resource on earth that's truly finite is time. And
Mm.
so the relationships that you have and the relationships that you build are the actual true measure of wealth.
Hmm.
The good thing about having money is that then you can have more time to spend with people.
Oh, sure.
Like
Frees up your time. Yeah. Yeah.
that's the utility that money provides. It buys
Hmm.
you time. If I give you a pair of scissors, you can go and mow your lawn. It's just going to take you a long time,
Right.
right? Whereas if you got a couple $100 and you can get a gas powered lawnmower and some gas, well, you just bought yourself a whole lot of time that you can
Hmm.
actually do things you want to do.
Yeah.
That's the only benefit that it provides you. It gives you time, it gives you options.
Hmm. Yeah. 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 Options too, for sure. But yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. You have to actually understand the utility of money. Like
Hmm.
if your goal is just money for money's sake, well, that's useless. But if you can understand the utility of it and then you're using it in the proper ways, well, then it can be good.
Hmm.
Just people get it twisted. They don't really understand what it is that they're doing. They think that money like provides freedom or whatever, and that's because they have a completely twisted view of freedom. They don't know what
Hmm.
freedom actually is.
Yeah.
Like what freedom really is, freedom is the ability to pursue that which is best for you. Okay. Snorting heroin off a hooker's ass is not what's best for you. It may be
Right.
something that you would like to do, but
Sure.
it's not what's best for you. Right. At no point in time did any person go, you know what's best for me right now? It's no. Right. And so, and that's the concept we used to have and that we understood when we built our country, was that liberty did not mean hedonism or just,
Mm.
the ability to enjoy vice without consequence. No, liberty meant that you were free to pursue good without being interfered with.
Hmm.
Yeah. You had questions. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, no,
I
no.
tend to ramble.
I just thought I was recently hanging with a friend of mine, former Marine, and another fellow walked up, and I forget exactly what he said, but just had some like, I forget what he said. Something like, haha, Marines eat crayons or whatever. I mean, this is an old guy. He was a hard man. He's got like I think he has a silver star from Korea or something. So not a sissy, but he was joking around with this friend of mine, and then walked on, and my friend's like, yeah, that's pretty much our relationship. He's like, I'm more than a Marine. Do you find that now that you're out, when you interact with people, do you find that in a lot they treat you as if you're just a soldier and that's it, or
Well, no, but that's because I don't pigeonhole my identity as a veteran or as a soldier.
okay, sure.
Like I don't identify myself as a soldier.
Hmm.
I much more so identify myself as a father and as a husband.
Mm.
I identify myself as a a Christian man who's becoming Catholic, right? Like
Mm.
I identify myself by other things. And now when I'm specifically talking to veterans, then I bring it up. But that's only as relates to, is that your lights or your camera?
It's the lights. I don't know, might lose power, who knows. I don't
Yeah.
know what's going on.
Um, but like when I was running for office, when I ran for Texas House,
Mm-hmm.
I would put it out there that I was a veteran, but I would do that one time at the very beginning, and that was it.
Sure,
And that
sure.
as an introduction, and a part of that was just because I'm only 38, and so I'm a little bit young for politics,
Mm.
and so that helps get some buy-in from the audience where they're like, okay, he's a little young, but like we can trust him. Right? He's
Sure, there's
he's
a
served
connection.
he's served before. We honor military people, right?
Mm-hmm.
One of the last institutions that we actually honor, and I think that's ending quickly.
Hmm.
Um, but and other than that, like you'll notice, like I wear this pin. You might
Yeah.
notice,
Yep.
right?
The Purple
I
Heart
wore my
pin. Yeah.
yeah, I wear a Purple Heart pin, but I don't ever tell anybody what it is or like point it out or anything else like that. So basically, for the people who know what
Mm.
it is, they'll know what it is. And if you don't know what it is, then you won't know what it is because I'm not going to tell you because the point of it isn't thank me for my service. The point
Mm-hmm.
is as like a hat tip to those who know. And I've seen plenty of veterans who are wearing veterans hats who have no idea what it is. That's fine. The
Sure.
point is not for me to try to create some parasitic relationship of some sort. It's for those who know, we're probably on the same wavelength, and for those who don't, we can talk about something else, and it's not necessary.
Hmm.
But I don't make veteran my the center point from which I stand.
Hmm.
I make it's only a small piece of me, and I only talk about it as it relates to other things that actually matter. Like
Hmm.
if I'm like at no point in this conversation have I ever said as a veteran, but I
As a veteran. Yeah,
like
exactly.
I just don't do that. But I've
Right.
talked. but I've talked about virtue, I've talked about values, I've talked about
Mm,
heritage, I've talked about all of these different things that are connected to the military, right? I've even talked about, why I think that people should or shouldn't join or whatever. But like, I do all of that from a broader perspective than just my personal experience, right?
mm, mm-hmm,
My personal experience informs my perspective and my outlook, but it's not just my experience. Like I have I have I have personally gone and read and learned and grown so that it's more than that. Like, what's the
mm,
saddest thing, or have you ever dealt with, or if you ever, the saddest thing I ever saw was like 5 or 10 years after high school. I came back and I saw all the same people standing in all the same corners doing all the same stuff. 10 years
mm.
after high school.
Oh yeah. While you were gone doing stuff, becoming a different person, becoming a man.
Right.
Huh. Yeah.
They hadn't leveled up at all. They were still level one.
Hmm.
They had not done anything. And I'm not saying that they needed to go and fight a war. No, 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 no.
Sure.
I'm just saying, like, did you do anything at all? No, they didn't. They graduated high school and they stopped. Like the people who, like, the only stories they can tell are about their high school football team, and that's it. That's all they got. They never
Right.
did anything of virtue or value after that. The same thing for military people. It's like, if the only stories that you can talk about with other veterans is basic training, then that tells me you didn't do anything after you
Mm.
got out of basic training. Because the stories that you have are going to be things that suck, that become fun later because you have that camaraderie and that brotherhood and everything. You learn to embrace the suck,
Right.
and you and things that you've conquered, right? Like those are
Hmm.
the two things. And a lot of the time the suck is about conquering the suck, or at least conquering your your desire to escape the suck and becoming stoic and just becoming
Mm.
accepting, right? Like
You
that's kind of the storylines in
controlling how,
broad.
yeah, controlling how you were saying earlier, you can control how you respond to things. So if you control yourself, that's the victory. If you control
Yes,
how you respond to the suck, then that's the
yes,
victory. Huh.
right.
Yeah, yeah. I
Because
like
you
it.
can't you can't change the weather. You can't change whether or not your socks are wet. You can't change there's none of that stuff do you have any control over. You can just change whether or not you're whining about it or whether or not you're laughing about it.
Mm.
That's it.
Yeah.
Or maybe you're just stoic and like just but
Right.
that's no fun either. Like you might as well just tell stories and have fun. Like because what's the point in being glum? What's the point in crying or like
Hmm.
why?
Yeah.
Because nobody
Yeah.
wants to be around those people. And again, the only thing that really gives you value in this life is your relationships. And
Hmm.
if my options are to be with a person who's fun or to be with a person who's a stick in the mud, I know who I'm going to spend time with. And the
Right.
person who's going to be in the stick in the mud is almost as bad as the person who bitches and whines incessantly about everything. I mean, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
Bitching is like it's a sport in the military. Like everybody does it.
Right. Right.
But it's how you do it.
Yep.
Like, are you doing it as a shared suck, or are you doing it like in some sort of like vainglorious attempt to actually like what like you're gonna change things? Like, no, you're not gonna change anything. Like, what kind of retardation is that? Come on now. Yeah. So the mindset matters a lot, and
Hmm.
it really matters whether you're bitching or whether you're whining. Bitching is fine. Whining is not.
Mm.
Nobody
Yeah.
like nobody wants to deal with a whiner.
Sure. Sure.
We want to
There
deal with people who solve problems. But if you can't solve the problem, then it's fine to like complain about it a little bit.
with a twinkle in
Especially,
your eye.
with a twinkle in your eye, when where you're having fun about it. But like, if you're taking it seriously, like you're doing it wrong.
Hmm.
None of it's serious. It's
Yeah.
all deadly serious, but it's not serious at all
Hmm.
because you can't control it.
Right.
That's the fun.
Yeah.
That's like life in a nutshell, right? Life is deadly serious work, but
Hmm.
the majority of it you have zero control over.
Yeah. Yeah. And and if you spend time stressing out about trying to control stuff you can't, then you're wasting that time and you're losing the opportunity to control things you can.
Yeah,
Hmm.
you know, why not just play spades? You're going to get just as much accomplished, but at least you're having fun playing spades.
Right. Right.
So might as
Yeah.
well
Well, I've never been good at spades, but that I
spend enough time doing it. You'll figure it out.
yeah, yeah, I bet.
It's just like I
Uh,
mean, nobody comes out this life, turning cartwheels out their mama, right? We all got to
sure.
crawl, walk, run.
Yep. Yep.
It's the same way with stoicism. Like again, nobody expects the 19-year-old, brand new soldier to be like Marcus Aurelius. We just expect you to be better today than you were yesterday, and
Mm,
that's
yeah.
that's that's what brotherhood gives.
Hmm.
Before we cut out,
Yeah.
which I don't have the timeline, but you might. But before we cut out, there is one thing that I wanted to make sure that we talked about that I forgot to put in the email. And it was the greatest difficulty that I see most veterans having
Mm,
is that they've lost their purpose, right? I
okay.
was just a diesel mechanic. Like
Sure.
I was nobody fancy, nobody important. I was enlisted, lower enlisted, junior enlisted. Like I wasn't an NCO, none of that stuff. I have no claims to fame from my military service. Okay. I was just a very, very small cog on a very, very large machine,
Hmm.
but I had purpose. I was
Mm,
very replaceable, but I was still an important piece of that machine. Valuable, vital, even very
yeah.
replaceable. They could put somebody else in and take me out and put me somewhere else.
But
But
the
my
cog had to be
job,
there.
and
Yeah.
the things that I did had virtue and value. And so I was an important piece of this machine. And the problem that a lot of veterans have is when they leave the military, they no longer have that sense of purpose. I had this for years. And I had a wife and I had kids. And so I had
Hmm.
a greater sense of purpose than a lot of people do. But as much as I love my wife and as much as I love my kids, that's not the same thing as that purpose as regards to work. Because right, wrong, or indifferent, we men derive a lot of our value from what we can protect and what we can provide and how we do that, right? And so, when I'm just turning wrenches in the oil field, or fracking or doing whatever, it's like it's good that I can provide, a good life for my family, and I'm glad that I'm I'm very grateful and thankful that I can do that. But I don't have I don't have that purpose to my job anymore, my career.
Hmm.
Like I and now I'm still a cog in a machine, but the machine doesn't really matter. Like, does it matter that, we actually have oil in America? Yes, it does. Like I'm not trying to dispute that. I like, when
Sure.
I was truckers are the lifeblood of America. Like I'm not trying to like denigrate any of these jobs, professions, or careers that I had, but I didn't have that same connection where I wasn't important in any stretch,
Hmm.
but I was a part of something that mattered,
Sure. Sure.
or at least it mattered to me. And being a representative of the United States of America and serving my nation, like that mattered to me, and
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have that anymore. Um, and so that's what finally got me to going back to church, because I quit for years after I got blown up. And
Hmm.
because I mean, yeah, children are dead. Like,
Yeah,
how? Why? Like,
yeah,
I
that's
don't, I
tough.
just don't understand, you know? And I can still not understand all of it, but that's fine. But um, but I have begun to get that feeling back. And part of the way that I've done that is when I was running for office, even though I didn't win, I was still, the whole mindset behind it was not, I'm trying to gain power, do whatever. It was like, I want to actually like serve people again. And
Hmm.
I really think that our government would do substantially better if we had people who were actually trying to serve. If we had more veterans who were running for office, who had the
Sure.
right mindset where, it's not about me. I want to serve. And I think that it's a disservice to our nation that we no longer honor civil servants, both in terms of politicians and in terms of the person who works at the DMV and the post office guy and
Hmm.
all of the different pieces that make society function. Like, we got wrapped up in wanting dollars and we forgot how much virtue there is in making sure that society functions.
Hmm.
And because good people don't do those jobs, that's where the blue haired freaks go, because they want to change the world, and they are.
Oh, oh, sure. I see what you're saying.
And because we gave all that up, we're perfectly willing to serve the military or Leo or fire department or whatever, but we're not willing to go work in the Social Security office and try to make that
Mm.
little piece better for society. And we we walked away from all of those institutions for years, and we see where they've gone over time.
Hmm.
Um, and then the secondary part is that's why I'm now becoming Catholic, because I need a rock. And so I
Hmm.
went for the religion that's 2,000 years old,
Hmm.
that has ancient traditions and culture and heritage. Because when when everything around you is shifting sand, you need something to hold on to. And at least I do. And so that's why I'm becoming Catholic, because you know
Hmm.
I need universal truth. I need universal beauty. I need universal good. I need a structure for reality, and then I can serve inside that reality. It's very tiresome to try to be your own God and in control of your own destiny. And the worst part is you're not.
Hmm.
We put all this effort into trying to be the masters of our destiny, and yet we're still not. Like, we're miserable and unhappy trying to be the masters of our own destiny, instead
Hmm.
of just submitting, instead of serving.
Thank you for listening to this episode of How I Embraced the Suck. If you enjoyed the show, tell a friend. And as my Girl Scout den mother used to say, stay frosty.
They're definitely tweeting a storm in the background.